This episode of Keys to the Shop is brought to you by Prima Coffee. Whether it's espresso machines, manual brewing devices, or general coffee shop needs, they seek to pursue the most innovative coffee products, both domestic and abroad, to offer their customers. Find out more at prima-coffee.com. This is Keys to the Shop, episode 51, The Power of Design in Coffee, with Liz Chai. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. I'm your host, and today's going to be a good episode. Got a good topic, the topic of design in coffee, and I'm really glad to have you along today. Thanks for listening to the show. And before we get started here, I do want to thank our sponsors, Prima Coffee. Prima Coffee, if you don't know, is a specialty coffee equipment supplier based out of Louisville, Kentucky. And the whole concept of their business is to take the best coffee brewing equipment around, bring it in and make it available to the general public. And the focus that they have is on curating the best equipment for every need that their customers might have. And this goes from anything from grinders to espresso machines, pour over bar setups, anything that you can think of that's coffee related pretty much. You can go to prima-coffee.com and you could probably find it. It's a great website, so I'd encourage you to go there and check it out. They put a big emphasis also on having the expertise in-house to help their customers get the right gear to fit every situation. And I totally vouch for them. They are big supporters of the coffee community. I use them in the stores here in Louisville, and I recommend them to you as well. So go to prima-coffee.com and check them out, reach out, tell them I said hello. And my thanks to Prima for your support of Keys to the Shop and to us as a coffee community as well. So today we are talking about design. And, we've always heard this phrase, you eat with your eyes first. Well, I came across a quote that I really liked the other day from Aristotle, the philosopher, because I read Aristotle all the time and we always quote Aristotle on the show, and I think it's really good though. The mind cannot think without an image. So it's not just eating or drinking, but literally everything we do, and therefore reasonably everything we feel, is attached to the image of something, whether it's seen or imagined. And so how we showcase coffee in our cafes to the customers, a really critical part of how they walk away feeling, how they feel about our coffee in our cafe and the total experience, but also how they feel about the industry. And that experience tells them, and what they imagine in their mind that experience tells them about specialty coffee. And our cafes represent that to the customer. So all the details and the work that goes together to form a complete picture and the impact of its effectiveness is determined by the quality of the parts that make up the whole of the experience. And so where do we stand now as an industry is a question in terms of design. How are we presenting ourselves to the public? Where should we look to improve? There's lots of areas we could look to. Is it just the coffee bags that we need to think about, or our t-shirts, or I don't know. What about branding? Are we doing all right? How do we know? Is it time to change? And how do we know when it's time to change? So all of these questions will be answered and more, because today we are talking with Liz Chai, who is a full-time designer in specialty coffee. She built her graphic design career basically as a coffee shop dweller, a coffee shop enthusiast. And after a design director stint with Octane Coffee in Atlanta, her passion for advancing the industry convinced her to focus her design and branding, illustration, and photography skills exclusively within the specialty coffee industry. And her love for coffee and design has resulted in an extensive travel, and she's been to many, many cafes around the world as she's as many as she possibly can. for design and development of a coffee traveler's journal. She has traveled across the United States on a 3-week trip that was dubbed the Cross Country Camper Coffee Crawl. Try saying that 5 times fast. Living in a teardrop camper that was outfitted with a Linea Mini, visiting 35 different cafes between Atlanta and Portland, where she now dwells, Portland, Oregon. And she currently freelances on coffee-related design projects and contributes to coffee media publications such as Sprudge, Caffeine Magazine, and Fresh Cut Magazine. And you can see her work at chai.coffee, or you can just find her on social media at Chai Americano. And it was just such a thrill to talk with Liz about this. I enjoyed her take on the industry from a designer's perspective. We get to talk about all of those questions that we just mentioned. We get to talk about mistakes made in the cafe design, the importance of being on brand, how to know if it's time to rebrand. She offers up great guidelines that will get us thinking in the right direction, because obviously, if you look around in your cafe and in other cafes, we all have work to do. I'm sure we're better off than we used to be, and we'll talk about that in this episode as well. But we can always improve, and it's my hope, and I think you will find that this episode will help you get some good tools and insights to direct those improvements. So let's get to our conversation now, talking about the power of design in coffee with Liz Chai. Hello, Liz. Welcome to Keys to the Shop.
Hey, Chris. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing really, really good. How are you?
I'm doing great. It is a beautiful day in Portland. We have sunshine today.
Oh,
the
wow.
rain hasn't started yet for fall.
That's kind of a rare thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so happy for you. Here we are. We're talking about design. You are known the coffee world over for fantastic work. And we link to your work in our show notes here in this episode. And so folks, definitely check that out. But you were in coffee how long ago? How long have you been in coffee?
Oh my gosh. Professionally, I think 2013. So okay. A few years. But then as a customer and sort of, not really a coffee shop lurker, but I spent so much of my life in the walls of coffee shops. So it sort of absorbed into me through osmosis. I think the culture of it is just part of my makeup as like my personal identity. So high school is probably when I first started going to coffee shops, and but professionally, it's been 2013, and 2014 is when I was working with Octane as their design director in Atlanta.
So did design come first, or did coffee come first?
Well, design came first for sure. I've been an artist kind of my whole life. I studied electronic media, and that's sort of when I got introduced to graphic design programs like Illustrator and Photoshop. And I actually used to work in the music industry, so I did a lot of design work for music, like bands and stuff.
Oh, nice.
Did some event planning, like I booked concerts, and I would design flyers and album artwork, things like that. And that was also at the same time that I was hanging out in the coffee shop. I was working on a lot of those design projects as a freelance designer, and then also have worked in a couple of different companies doing graphic design. So
how did you
it's been a long time.
A long time. Yeah. Like, how did you get into coffee then? You were a patron of coffee shops, and then you decided to go pro. Like, what made that happen?
Oh my gosh. I think, so I used to go and sit in Octane, and this was probably when I moved to Atlanta. It was 2003, and that's when Octane opened. Mm-hmm. They're the ones who sort of introduced specialty coffee to Atlanta and much of the Southeast. And I would just go there and get coffee and then work on their Wi-Fi and do my design projects. But then the third wave sort of hit, I don't know, 2006-ish. And or at least that's when it was hitting Atlanta. And I think I'm trying to remember how it really started for me. It's when I found out what single origin coffee was and had that kind of understanding, I started getting nerdy and doing home brewing. I think I started with an AeroPress, and then I got a Chemex, and I was going to different coffee shops around that time as well. So anytime I'd travel, I would want to go to see a coffee shop and try their coffee. And I just started learning more about it and getting really nerdy about it. So more like an enthusiast. And then it was like 2013, like when I did some freelance work for Octane, that I started doing actual coffee design. I guess that was my first coffee design project. And then around that time, I also started, I think I went to my first SERBC. There were some Octane baristas who were competing in a regional competition in Atlanta, and I went to go see that. And then later went to Big Eastern in Durham. And that was sort of like a whole new world. And it was really interesting to me. So competition is part of what got me into sort of another level of the coffee industry. And then doing design work for a coffee company. Also, I had been paying attention to design in coffee for a while already, just as a customer, and a traveler. So it was, I just fell in love with it. And then decided to devote my career to coffee specifically because I cared so much about the coffee industry, and I didn't really care about other things.
Yeah, coffee does that. It's weird.
Yeah, it is. It's a really special thing.
Yeah, it's a special community, and it's so multifaceted, and there's a place for everyone in coffee. You mentioned that you're traveling. You had I think this is correct, so correct me if I'm wrong, the cross-country camper coffee crawl.
Yes, you got it.
Yeah, a lot of "k" and "k" sounds in there. So that was during that coffee nerdy phase. Was that at the time you were just enamored with coffee and exploring it?
That was actually after I had worked with Octane, and I was trying to move from Atlanta to Portland because that was the point when I decided I'm going to go freelance and I'm going to just focus my entire design career on the coffee industry. And so Portland, I had visited there just for, I went to see a concert for my birthday and fell in love with it. But then also around that same time was when I was like falling head over heels for coffee, and Portland just seemed like I loved it so much. The moment I stepped off the bus into downtown Portland, I was like, I have to live here. And it took me a little while actually to finish up some projects in Atlanta and then like figure out a plan for completely shifting my whole entire life, because I was very established in Atlanta. I had been there for 13 years. So then, yeah, to get to Portland, it took me a little while, but it was the cross-country camper coffee crawl was really just me moving. It wasn't really planned to be a thing, only it kind of turned into a thing as I was traveling. So it was just for fun. But that was all definitely after I had already established this idea of my persona as a coffee traveler. And then, like, I've been talking about this for a while and it's kind of in the works right now, but doing, like, a lot of people come to me for recommendations when they go to a city and they ask me where to go get coffee. And I always have an answer because I either have been there myself or I have trusted people to send them to the right place. And so I've been, planning to take that persona to another step forward and then publish a journal about coffee travel.
That's awesome. That is such a rewarding thing. Baristas listening now who have travelers going through their cities asking, recommending your friends, recommending a shop for sure has an amazing coffee program. There's nothing quite like that. So I look forward to seeing that journal come out, because that's just really going to help the industry.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. So how has it been going now that you've been fully focused on the coffee industry as a designer?
It's going great. I love Portland so much. It was a really, really good move, a really good step for me. There's so much going on in coffee right now, just in our industry as a whole. There's so much going on. And I think I had felt a little bit in music, like designers who work in the music industry and even a lot of other industries get protective or kind of grabby about projects. And it always kind of baffled me because there's definitely enough work to go around for everyone. So I don't know. I kind of have gotten to the point in my career where I'm able to say, like, I think that this, rather than just being like, yeah, I'll take any coffee project that comes across the table, say, like, I think this would be a good fit for this person, or I think that, maybe this isn't the most ideal project for me. Maybe we can work on something in the future, or maybe it belongs to someone else, and that's okay. I determined myself to only take coffee projects, which as a freelancer, that's very scary to say no, because you never know when you're going to have work. And so you kind of have to just take it when it comes to you. And it's very, very scary saying no. And really, this is the first time in my life as a designer, as a freelance designer, where I've been able to say no to a project, knowing that there will be something else. And when you say no to something, it gives you the ability to say yes to something else that might be a better fit.
Yeah, that's a great.
So
yeah. Like there's a book by Evan. Oh, I'm gonna mess it up. I won't say the name because I totally forgot just now. The Essentialist is.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm reading it right now.
Yeah. There you go. And it's the power of no. Like 2 letters are gonna change your life. Like not always saying yes to stuff is powerful.
Yeah, that's also something that's really impacted the way I work as a freelancer and I'm starting to try and learn these practices to be able to say, even about adding something to my schedule, like, is this essential? Do I need to do this? Is it crucial? Or can I put it on the back burner? Or can I just say no to it? Can I let someone else do this? Because then I have the ability to do better work on the things that I care the most about, or that are the most important thing, the higher priority.
This is great. I want to know, so you spent so much time in coffee shops from the perspective of a designer, and what was your opinion? What were your impressions of the state of design in cafes, in the coffee world, before you decided to go into it full time? What were your impressions?
Gosh, well, since I've been around for such a long time, I can actually remember the second wave, and it's kind of like looking back at 90s nostalgia. It's like, oh, that was so awful. But then you see places like Urban Outfitters that want to take the 80s and the 90s and then have a revival. And then I think that they actually can make something like that improve on the flaws.
Sure.
So I don't know. The state of coffee design, there really wasn't coffee design a long time ago. It was just like, it was more of like the tone of our entire culture, So if you think way, way, way back, it was coffee houses. And they were very dark. And
sure.
I don't know. It's almost like, I almost picture it like beatniky a little bit. This also probably has to do with the fact that I grew up in Iowa City, which is very, very much like that. So we had like beatnik kind of coffee shops, and like we had, I think, a smoking coffee shop where you could go buy cigars and stuff like that and smoke them inside the coffee shop. But then also, what I know, I'm sure they're not around anymore. I think it was called the Tobacco Bowl in Iowa City. Um, so there was a shop that I went to all the time called the Java House, and they're still operating. They're the first place that I ever had pour over from. They did it way before anyone else, way before pour over was a word in our just like everyday language.
Right.
But you know, they haven't really advanced with the rest of the coffee industry. They're kind of still doing their same thing. And that's kind of hard for me to watch, you know, because that was a home-based coffee shop for me. That's what introduced me to coffee. That's where I drank my first coffee, I'm sure. But coffee design has turned into such an important thing because the coffee shop life or going to coffee shops is such a part of our culture now. And obviously, I think we can thank Starbucks for that, for making it part of our everyday lives. But then the specialty coffee industry has been able to fine tune it, you know, where, you know, and having the last name Chai, that's another thing I also credit to Starbucks. No one, I got teased about my last name ever since I was a kid. And then all of a sudden, Starbucks is serving chai. I think it was Oregon chai. And then all of a sudden it was really cool. My name was so cool. So thank you, Starbucks. And people can actually pronounce it now.
Good job, Starbucks. Nice.
So yeah, I don't know. Obviously, design has improved in coffee, but also as a whole in our culture, it's become a much more important thing that people pay attention to as part of your business as a whole, in restaurants, in boutiques, in you know, anything that's specialty seems to revolve around beautiful design as well. Because I think if we care so much about what it is that goes into the cup or the bar or the, you know, whatever it is that we're making, if it's crafted to perfection, then obviously it needs to be sort of in the frame of beauty as well, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. This is obviously something that's really important to you. Design is what you've given your life to. I wonder if you could just kind of explain where you're coming from foundationally, why design is so important to you.
Design is something that is really specific to our human experience, I think. Like, we can experience things like beauty and emotion and, you know, things like aesthetic and like all those things make life more beautiful and enjoyable. And, you know, I've definitely seen like good and bad times in my life. And even like during like the darker parts or like the valleys that I've been through, I've kind of thought to myself, like, at least this isn't boring. Like, at least this is like interesting, you know, like we're not like a cow standing out in the field all day, you know, like munching on grass. Like, we have something like as humans, like to experience all this stuff that we get to enjoy. And I think that if we didn't have beauty, then life would be very boring. And coffee, we all love coffee. If you're listening to this podcast, I'm sure you love coffee. Coffee makes life more beautiful, don't you think?
Yeah.
I can't imagine what people talk about, how we might not have coffee in 50 years. And I'm like, I couldn't live that way. You know, like food too, like good food makes life so beautiful and it's so filling to your soul. So good design to help advance these things is really important. And also just the way I personally live my life, I want, you know, all my surroundings to be beautiful. And that doesn't necessarily have to be like in the basic kind of way, you know, like decorated pretty or something, but just each individual human sees beauty in a different way. Sometimes it might be a very different idea of what I see as beautiful, you know, but that's person's own experience. So it might be goth, you know, or it might be very dark, or it might be really quirky and avant-garde. And I love that, because like humans are so different. And I don't know, I love that people can see beauty in dissonance too.
Sure.
So,
yeah, you need sometimes you need the negative to highlight the positive. And
yeah.
sometimes, like in tasting coffees, you can get flavors that are complementary, or flavors that are similar and they still work together. Like if you're putting a signature beverage together, you can say, well, this goes with chocolate, or this tastes similar to chocolate. So they both go together. And I don't know, like I have this conundrum with music. Sometimes I want music that matches my mood. Other times I want music to get me out of the mood that I'm in.
Yeah, totally. And also I'm thinking even roasting style, like that I see as an art, and I see roasters as like the chefs of coffee, and there isn't really a right answer. I would say there's definitely a wrong answer. But there's so many ways that someone can treat design or beauty or music or food or coffee, There's so many different things that you can do with it, or even the way you present or serve a coffee, or the way you have a coffee shop. Like if you have a coffee shop, there's not a right answer. It's almost like your artistic expression. Say you're a cafe owner, like this is also like your creative expression is what your coffee shop looks like and how you set it up. It's part of who you are.
Yeah, so that is a critical part of the cafe experience. I wonder if you could say a little bit more about that. Like how does design practically fit into the way that customers perceive specialty coffee?
Well, I think customers, some people want a very specific thing and will go find that thing. And that's fine. There are people also, I think, who are, can be flexible, or if they think the most important thing is what the coffee tastes like, which that's important for me. I don't usually go to shops where I don't enjoy the coffee. But that's not how everybody is. It's kind of funny. Everyone has a different perspective on what they're looking for. Sometimes I choose the shop that I'm going to go to based on how comfortable the seat is going to be, because I'm going to be sitting there for 2 hours, Yeah. I think that the experience is something that certain customers crave and others don't think very much about. But I do think it's important, because the experience in the cafe is what builds long-term brand loyalty, and customers will keep coming back with the right setting. And I think that there's almost like a formula to it, for me anyway. If you say you have this perfectly arranged coffee shop and it hits all the right notes in terms of beauty and how it feels and how it looks and the lighting and the music and the baristas are nice and the coffee is bad, it's like, that's unfortunate. I probably won't go there very often. And you could go the other way as well. You could have really, really great coffee and an off-putting environment, and I'm probably not going to want to go there very often. I might go there sometimes, but if you have both of those things, that's the shop that I want to go to all the time,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that kind of dichotomy that we give ourselves sometimes, a false dichotomy, like we can focus on the coffee and we can be Spartan in our design. And sometimes and it's fine, there's this, what you just said, like we can do what we want. If you're the owner, do what you want. But sometimes I feel like we can alienate people because there's this all or nothing mentality. Like it's all coffee quality, or it's all comfy couches, but not both.
Yeah.
Maybe we're getting better at that.
I mean, there's also mediocre at both, and that's, not uncommon. And I'll probably go to those shops personally every now and then as well. I don't know. It's like everyone has different things that they value, or that they're looking for. And it's kind of like if you're a cafe owner or you own a roastery even, I think probably as a business person, you should know you're never going to please everyone. And I believe you should do what you're going to do. Like, do what is important to you. But try to also be flexible on certain areas. Like if you are doing your thing, quality is the most important thing, which I think is great. I think we need to have that. But then you're getting constant criticism in an area, like at least like hear people out and know that, and this, I would say the same thing that I would tell a design client. Like people are going to give your coffee a chance based on the impression that they have of it, sometimes visually. So I might not even give a coffee a chance if it looks, that sounds really shallow, but like if the logo is bad on a restaurant, I question whether the food is going to be any good. I mean, that to me communicates this idea that you don't care about presenting what you're offering in a nice package, you know? And as much as people want to fight against this, because I see musicians in the same way. They're like, they just want people to listen to their music, but going to give your demo a chance? Probably. Like, it's very hard to get people to give you a chance. It's very, like, especially when you have a gazillion options in front of you. There's so much coffee available to us right now. Why should I try this coffee? You know, why should I pay for this coffee and have it shipped to me to try it? It definitely will help people open their minds to giving you a chance, or I think it's like when someone puts the time and energy into building a brand and identity, it's almost like I can trust them because I know they are putting so much thought into that thing. There's a chance that also they're putting a lot of thought and that same amount of energy into the product. That obviously is not always the case. People can use design for evil as well. And there's many examples of that, which is unfortunate, but we try to not promote that in the coffee industry because we care so much about coffee and want it to be portrayed in an honest way, you know?
Yeah. So we're not, trying to manipulate people or exploit people. There's a lot of talk in the coffee industry about, using images of farmers and things like that, where it initially seemed like a good idea to do and didn't raise any eyebrows, but the more we become aware of the situation of the subject that we're using as a design, the more we know that that's a human behind that. Like the kind of weirder it gets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. And that's I love that example because that is a really important part of our history as an industry, like seeing that we kind of had to make that mistake and learn from it, which it's something I think that was being it's still being talked about, but like something that I think as Americans became more aware of when that was part of marketing, like in the early third wave.
Sure. And there's all of this stuff that's been happening with throwdown posters and AeroPress competition posters that I've seen in the last year with, exploiting women. And there's a lot of other things too that happen in design that it's weird. Like the whole point of design, and this is coming from a non-designer, so it seems like you want to grab attention, but there are some really base elements that don't need to have the spotlight that you can steer away from and still grab people's attention, right?
Right. Yeah, it's frustrating because I'm an independent and I do freelance and I don't have a big PR and marketing agency telling me like, you need to use this word in the copy or you need to use this kind of image in what you're creating because we did the research and this is what's going to sell more. This is what's going to like build impressions. Like I'm much more, I don't know. I don't like, I'm too punk rock for that, I guess. Just like I create design that I think looks good. I don't do it because it's going to sell. I'm not doing it for shock value. And a lot of companies, especially big companies, have the money to be able to do research like that, to say, oh, if we use this kind of phrasing, then we're going to sell this many hundreds of thousands of dollars of product. And the product might not be that great, but if you present it in a way, then you're going to trick people into buying it. And I hate that. That's the worst thing about the power of design, is you can trick and manipulate people. And I personally never want to do something like that, but it's something to be aware of as well, especially in big business, grocery stores, like you see that stuff all the time.
All right. So we've kind of, got the meaning of design, and it's super important for the coffee shop in the cafe experience, because, people are looking for different things, and we want to be able to meet them where they're at. And we know we're not going to please everybody, but good design in a coffee shop facilitates hospitality, and it really showcases the quality of our product, specialty coffee. That's why you're a designer in specialty coffee. Do you believe in this industry and in the proper use of design, the power of good design? So let's say that we're looking around our store, and we want to assess the level of our design in the store. No doubt we all have something that we can improve upon. What are some things that we should look at that are symptomatic of, I'll say, bad design, or things that could be improved that might be hurting our business or the customer experience?
If I was going to mostly focus on like graphic design, not interior design or flow, I would probably hone in on branding. So when I say branding, I'm talking essentially about the logo and the overall visual look. So some people kind of use branding in a different way. As a graphic designer, I'm talking about logo. Identity is maybe going to include the color palette that you use, the typefaces that you use in your materials, the overall style and layout of collateral, things like that. So collateral, like printed menus and cards, things like that. I would say if you're looking at your brand, ask if it's working, because so many companies get into this almost like they want to rebrand all the time. And if it's working okay, like if it's not broken, you don't need to fix it, like it might be fine, and just stick with it. Because you've built up maybe years of brand loyalty to a particular identity and brand. And if it's working, just stick with it. If you need a refresh, maybe, there's kind of some rules surrounding that, like maybe a refresh every like 5 or 7 years, something like that. But you don't want to lose the heart of what your brand already is, unless it's not working. Like if it's something, even if it's something that you have heard people complain about, or if it's extremely outdated, like if you look second wave and you're not serving second wave type coffee, then I would say definitely it's time to rebrand. Maybe even time to rename a company. Like that's another thing that people don't talk about a lot, is if you're not even really the same company, then it might be time for you to like start afresh as something new, rather than just trying to make adjustments as you go along. And I've seen that done recently with Windmill in Ames, Iowa. They were a different company for many years and decided to completely change their roasting style and their operation, and they renamed themselves Windmill and then rebranded. So it might be time to do that. I think be honest with yourself. Like if you're a cafe owner or you own a coffee company, I personally think it's always good to have a high standard for yourself and like I ask myself all the time, like, how can this be better? Which is a really hard and scary question to ask because it means probably more work. It means probably you're not done yet. You can't just go take a vacation. There's more work to be done. Another thing too is ask people that you trust, what can you do to make it better? Like ask some people, like it can be hard for people, I think, to be honest with you. And like if you ask a friend, like what should I change about my coffee shop or my logo? People who love you are going to have a hard time telling you, being honest with you.
Oh, yeah.
And saying like, oh, this is terrible. You need to change it. You needed to change it like 5 years ago. But you know, one technique that you can use is give them an opportunity, say, tell me 2 good things and 2 bad things or something like that. What can I do to make this better? What am I doing good? And then they almost like have permission to be honest. And limiting it to 2 or 3 things is good for people too. Then they feel like they can actually just like sneak that one big one in there. Yeah, I would say that. And then, yeah, it's tricky because some people don't need to do anything and they're like itching because they're bored with their brand because they just see it every day. When it's just, it has traction where you're at in the community. You don't need to do anything. Or you maybe just need to clean things up.
Yeah, that seems like a battle between, I think it was kind of based on FOMO, but fear of the better option, or FOBO, like having the culture around you say that you should use this kind of geometrical pattern for your logo.
Right.
And you've got some crazy boring geometry in your logo, but it's working because you have brand loyalty. How do you, I mean, get over that and focus so that you can, you know, work on other parts of the business that need more attention? How can you embrace the working brand?
Gosh, I mean, I'm an advocate of, if you're a cafe owner, you should not even be worrying about design. You should be giving that work to someone who's a professional, who actually knows, who can tell you, like, so that you can focus on the thing that you need to be doing, which is probably running your cafe or roasting coffee or whatever it is that you do. Sorry, my examples are very simplified. There's so many like variations on this, and it applies to so many different things, but it can be scary when you want to do everything yourself. I've been there, you know, like I have my own business. I want to be able to do everything myself, but then like website coding, for example, I can do this. It's just going to take me like 20 times longer than if I would just pay someone to do it. Sure. Someone who I trust, someone who's going to do a good job. And then I can focus this is the same as the idea of the essentialist thing. Like if I'm letting someone else who knows what they're doing to focus on this and do a good job of it, then I can do what I'm supposed to be doing, whatever my business is. If what you're supposed to be doing is design, you should be a designer. Right. Not a coffee shop owner.
Well, you know, a lot of owners and others too would want to dabble in design because it is the thing they see. And I think you hit on something so potent that we see it every day. And for us, it's like if you change a menu because you're bored with the menu, that might work. It might work, but by and large, I'd advise against that because without measuring its effectiveness in the field, like what are the signs of a brand that's working?
I have some, I call them my coffee crushes, my coffee design crushes. I have been a longtime fan of Coffee Supreme and Al Keating and what he does in New Zealand. 3FE is a great example. They have a fantastic brand. They're consistent. That's really important in design and in branding and identity, is consistency. So even the book that Colin just came out with, even though that's not a 3FE book, it's a Colin Harmon book, it's still the same color as everything else that he does. It's so simple. Like his cafe has this red as their brand color, and they're very consistent in using it. Everything is very clean and consistent there. I love that. Sight Glass and Four Barrel, they always do a great job. Their shops are beautiful, and also their logo, their identity system fits their cafes really well. So when you walk in, you know you're in a Four Barrel shop because it feels that way, you know, the music and the materials used and like the personality really fits with the personality of what's on their packaging and what their logo is. So those are some biggies, more big companies, I guess, that do it really well.
Can you have that if you're just starting your business? Because it seems like it is something that gets created over time. Like if you walk into Four Barrel today, it's become what it is today. But in the beginning, maybe it wasn't. It was like the seedling of what it is today.
Right.
So just starting out, what would you say to somebody, like are the main things they should focus on in order to nurture that sense of like developing into the brand?
That is a great question. And most of my clientele they don't have deep pockets, you know, they don't have VC funding. Which is great because, and I love that. It's also probably why I continue to freelance, because I have always been kind of DIY. I've always been I don't have a problem with big business necessarily. I think there's a place for it for sure. But it is tricky when, say you want to open a coffee shop or a roasting company or a consultation firm, I don't know, or you have a product, like say you have a new carafe that you're doing, like all of that stuff needs design. Like you need design. If you're a company that wants to sell something to someone else, you need it. There's really no way around it. And this is the thing that I believe deeply, and I try to almost like protect all new business owners, because people want to jerry-rig as they get going. And I think that is so dangerous because you only have one first impression. And say you want to, this is inevitably what happens when you're like, oh, I don't have the money for a logo right now, so I'm just going to throw something together, then launch my business, and then when I have money, then I'll put the money into that logo. So this is just a basic example. The drawback of something like that is you're going to get comfortable really fast. You're going to get busy really, really fast. And you're probably never going to get to the point where you're like, oh, I really feel like dropping a ton of money on a logo because I have one and it's fine. You know, it's like a good enough thing.
Yeah.
And when you have something that's good enough, that's when you get comfortable and stagnant, and you're not like, you're capable of so much more, but you're just nice and comfy there. And that is something I try to keep people from making that mistake, because I almost want to just promise it's inevitable. You're really not going to come back to me in 6 months and hire me then. Like that never has happened.
Right.
So treat your business as professionally as you're treating the product that you're selling, and like spend the money. Like even if it's not a ton of money, figure out what your budget is, or figure out what you are able to spend, and then like double that and find a way to make it work. You know, like you wouldn't bend on like your espresso machine, you know?
Right.
There's certain things that you won't bend on, or like the certain kind of roaster that you want to have, or, you know, there are certain areas for sure that you can maybe cut corners on, or you don't get the thing that you really, really want, but don't bend on design because it can backfire on you so quickly. And that's probably been one of my biggest challenges as a designer, is working with my clients, is a lot of business owners don't understand the true value of design and what it can do for them and how powerful it is. And also, when you don't have it, how harmful it can be for your business. So
yeah, it seems like it would just confuse people if you change midstream, or
yeah,
maybe it doesn't communicate the ethos of your company as effectively as you would have hoped it would. And I suppose maybe part of that, you know, jerry-rigging a starting logo and package that's just like, I'll change it later, is thinking that people will know who we are based on our interactions with them. But the image is, like you say, it's the first impression. And it's like, if you serve somebody a coffee in a dirty cup, you know, that cup might not affect the flavor of the coffee. And you could console somebody and say, no, it's all right. It's just a real bad stain, but it's not going to affect the flavor. I don't think it's going to taste quite the same, or at least they're not going to enjoy it as much. But
it is going to taste different because of their perception of it. And they're never going to forget that.
I wouldn't forget it. No.
That's a really great way of putting it too. I think, the way you present yourself, your introduction to the world, it communicates so much about you, and people are going to have an impression of what you stand for as a company. And if you are jerry-rigging something, people are going to know. People are going to see that. And even if you like pull everything together and you like, maybe you started up in a certain way, and it was, you know, you were bootstrapping at the beginning, but then you really, really got things together. Then you found an investor later, and then you're like doing really great. People who knew you from the very beginning are always going to see you a step below where you're truly at, because they have that impression of you, and you've devalued yourself. And it's the same as a designer. Like, I'm guilty of this all the time. I devalue my work all the time. Because, you know, I forget that people are going to listen to what you have to say about yourself, even in your mannerisms, or even in you describing like your struggles. Like, people are going to have an impression of what that means to you as a whole. And, you know, you really don't want people to see you as struggling right from the get-go. Or they're always going to feel sorry for you. And they're never going to treat your product seriously.
Yeah, we don't need pity. We just need patronage. And it's like the barista who's really in the weeds behind the bar gets more tips because they look like they're about to lose their mind. Those pity tips.
Yeah. Well,
I've collected my fair share.
I feel like I've gotten pity projects too, which never feels good. And I mean, it's like, I mean, there are definitely ways to get what you need. You can find ways to get what you need. Like, even like if someone came to me, they were starting a company, they had a concept or a business plan, and it was something I truly believed in, like, I would want to find a way to work with them. Like, let's work on this. Let's get you launched, and then figure out a way to like do pay over the long term, or pay in, you know, a variety of ways. Some people do trade. I try not to do trade anymore. But like things like that, there are ways around it. And I would definitely not suggest going to your cousin's niece who has Photoshop on their computer, like that kind of thing. Find a true professional. There's so many mistakes that will be made that, since you're not a design professional either, you won't even realize it. So yeah.
So now we're talking about things like bags, the logo, wherever your brand goes. If you're having to make design decisions, things that you can hire out, things that you need to be presenting to the customer in a confident way. So that's like what, the menu, the coffee bag, the business cards. What
retail, if you have retail products,
Yeah.
or if you have, I mean, social media as well, like even event posters and notices that you need to put online, everything visual, everything that you can see, even if it's your vessels that you use, you know?
We're not talking about putting logos on everything.
No, just what, I mean, think of G&B, you know, they have vessels for how they serve drip coffee, and that's part of their brand. Like when you see it in a photo, you know it's them. You don't need to see the logo on there. That's I would say more part of your identity. When people, or 4-barrel as another example, like you see something, you don't have to see 4-barrel written on there, but you know what it is because of how it looks. Because of this is all about consistency. Color is another huge thing. People maybe don't realize that having a fixed color palette is really, really important, and to not veer from it unless you have a reason to. Like you have to know the rules before you break them. So there's always a reason why you might want to make a change to something, but you have to have a really good reason.
Oh yeah, because eventually you're going to change we were just talking earlier about, you might want to change your logo at some point, but it sounds like if you started off on a confident foot, at least you have that as a starting point and you can just get better from there. So yeah, be confident. But what I hear you saying is also be confident if you're going to change it too. Yeah.
I think another thought is, I think honoring creative people and what they're able to offer you. Like you want to be treated in that way as a professional. You want people to take your, what you're presenting as a product, say it's coffee. You want people to honor you and pay you for that coffee. That you want people to pay you for the work that you're doing. And it's funny how often I personally, as a creative, and also hear this all the time, like no one wants to pay a photographer. No one wants to pay someone to do design work. Like they want whatever they can get for free, when it's like we want people to pay a lot of money for a cup of coffee, and we want them to do it frequently, like daily.
Yes.
But there's a lot of work, and there's a lot of work that goes into concepting something or understanding why to not do something.
That's an emotional process.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I've had clients who get really hung up on hourly billing. Like they want to be billed hourly, but then they get really, really uptight with every second that ticks by. They're like, oh, I can hear like nickels falling on the ground, every second. Nice. And it's like, part of what makes a good design is not the production that time spent creating that thing. It's all of the thought and research and, I guess like idea forming and brainstorming that goes into getting to the point of being able to create something. And I would even put photography and marketing into that category. Like there's a lot of work involved in not just the actual like click, you take the picture. That was the work. It only took you 30 seconds. So therefore I shouldn't have to pay you anything for it. Can you just throw something together? Can you throw me a logo together in like 20 minutes? It's like, no, you can't. You can't actually do that. I mean, you can, it won't be very good. And like I said, things like that can be harmful to you.
So I think so far what we've heard today has, for me at least, shed some light on the perspective that, that you have on specialty coffee as a designer shows us that we've made a lot of progress over the years. We're not putting burlap up on the walls that much anymore. I
have a special place in my heart for that, though. It's like nostalgia, maybe.
Yeah, it's like this burst of memory, and then you're like, okay, done.
Yeah.
So, we're going to keep progressing and we're going to keep making decisions, and hopefully we're going to more and more hire professionals such as yourself to help us with that. And any final advice for us as we open coffee bars and we look at sticking with a brand, rebranding? What's the kind of mentality that we should have towards the visual element of our coffee craft?
Personally, my thoughts on that are raising the bar just in everything. Like, we should have a high standard for ourselves personally in the way we operate, always. I personally always want to be working towards improving, identifying the areas that I need to make changes in, and then fixing mistakes that I've made and growing as a business owner. And all of that means, I know it can be scary, but hey, I need to improve in this area. I need to learn how to do this. I need to see my full operation professionally and at a higher standard. So, and that should absorb into every area. So like if I'm a cafe owner, I might have fantastic coffee and I might have a top of the line roasting machine, espresso machine. My team is great. They run things well, but I have these rundown countertops and tables or something like that. Like, that's an area of that I need to improve on. And I don't know, that there's also this mentality, like when we're comfortable in what we've been doing for a while, and I'm in the same place, it can be hard to remember what it was like to be an enthusiastic young new business owner, like where you would care about everything. So I always want to try and remember where I came from and be grateful for what I do have, and then find the areas to move forward in. And design is one of those things for sure. I think we should have a high standard for design. And what we're doing in coffee it's a huge privilege to be able to, our whole world revolves around this beautiful drink, and it's such a wonderful thing. I know it's such hard work for us, but it's such a privilege to be able to work in an industry like ours, and I don't ever want to forget that. So as we improve our companies, we're advancing the coffee industry as a whole. It's like a holistic idea of it. Maybe it's a drop in the bucket if I do something and do it well, but I'm contributing to the industry as a whole. I like to see it in that way, especially as a freelancer, not working for a specific company. But the work that I'm doing is for this thing that I care so much about. So that wasn't really clear advice, but just kind of my final thoughts on, I would love to see everyone improving and getting better every single day in whatever it is that they're focused on.
Awesome. I agree with that. That's great. And certainly design is going to help us get there and show the hard work in a beautiful way to people and say, look what we did. We did this coffee thing and it looks beautiful and it tastes great too. So, So I'm really thankful to be able to talk to you today. And I know everyone listening is too. How can we get in touch with you? Where can we find you online?
So I have a portfolio website. I always forget about it and I don't update it as often as I should. I really need to. It's www.chai.coffee. And then I am on Instagram at Chai Americano. And that's sort of a play on words because my last name is Chai, and I used to drink Americanos all the time, and I'm also Korean American, so that's sort of where that came from. Oh. But yeah, Chai Americano on Instagram, and then you see me around too. I'm at a lot of coffee events, so if you ever see me, come say hi.
Yeah, you
I
are.
love
You're
meeting
all over
coffee
the
people.
place.
I love it so much.
Well, I love that we had you here, and thank you so much again for your insights on design and cafe and coffee work. It was an honor to have you.
Thank you, Chris.
Well, talking to Liz in this conversation really got me focusing more on the details that consumers interact with, the things that the customer sees and handles in the store. We as professionals, we can be blind to our, because of our own familiarity with our surroundings. And the customer might be experiencing some design flaws that interrupts the momentum of the experience that we want them to have. I know Liz pointed out that after you get open and busy, it's really hard to go back and reassess things. You get used to good enough, and that often means, at least in my experience, and in Liz's experience too, we let things go on for years that may be damaging at worst or holding us back at best. So some of the takeaways that I wanted to mention real quick here, and there were many, but some of the ones that stood out to me were the idea that if it's not broken, don't fix it. Do you have a lot of customer loyalty to that imagery and that brand? Is your business thriving? Are you just wanting to change something because you see other people's logos and you like them better than the one you have, and you're just a little fidgety or nervously trying to scratch an itch that you see? It's like this fear of missing out. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Now, another thing that Liz mentioned is if it does need fixing, if it does need a refresh, you should get a professional to take a look at it for you. If you're not a designer yourself as the owner, then bringing in a professional will just pay off enormously because it's their sole focus. And that makes it possible for you to take your energy, focus it on different parts of the business where you are expert. And it just sounds like a win-win. Another aspect of design that you want to keep in mind to really harness the power of design in your cafe is the idea that your theme or your brand, you have to be on brand and be consistent throughout your establishment. So anything that the customer experiences visually, and even if it's textural, if it's the feel of the bags and the seats and tables, I don't know if you can really overthink these things. Put yourself in the customer's position, their point of view, as they handle the coffee bags that you have on your shelf and use the condiment bar. When they walk into the bathroom, they see colors on the walls in your cafe, the logo on your sign. Is it cohesive? Does it all fit together? A cohesive image is one that really creates this memory, and it identifies your brand at every turn. Liz was mentioning you really know that it's G&B Coffee when you see images of the different mugs they use, because they've chosen them specifically to fit with the rest of what G&B Coffee in LA is all about. It's the same thing with Coffee Supreme in New Zealand and Colin Harmon's 3FE in Dublin, Ireland. When you're interacting with those companies, you're interacting with a cohesive theme. And so lastly, one of the highlights for me was what we ended on. And of course, that is that we can always be improving. And it's basically that when we're comfortable, it can get hard to remember being enthusiastic about everything like we were in the beginning. So try to put on new eyes. Try to, revive that sense of curiosity and revive that sense of excitement and enthusiasm that allowed you to look at all of the details that right now may be missing. And that's really going to fuel your ability to improve and get better daily in whatever you're focusing on. And if you're doing that, if you're improving daily and just getting better daily on what you're focusing on, and you're encouraging within yourself that enthusiasm for the details of this specialty coffee venture that you're taking on, then you're not going to be able to help pass on that enthusiasm to the consumer. and how you design that experience and communicate that enthusiasm to the customer is going to be of the utmost importance. And I hope that Liz's conversation with me today was helpful in guiding you to the right path. So my thanks again to Liz for getting us to more deeply consider design in our cafes. I know that I'm not going to look at the cafe the same way when I walk in, and I hope that you don't either, and I hope this was encouraging. So again, you can go to @chai, CHAI, like the drink, Americano. @chai Americano is where you can find Liz on Twitter and Instagram, and her website is chai.coffee instead of .com. And that has some of her work there. Keep updated with what she's doing. She's doing great things for the coffee industry, making us look good. So again, thanks to Liz. So if you want the show notes for this episode, you can go to keystotheshop.com under the resources tab and find the downloadable PDF with the highlights from this episode. You can also find all of the past episodes. You're able to listen to those on the episode page. And if you want to reach out directly to me with any suggestions or questions, feedback, anything like that, you can email chris@keystotheshop.com. I always look forward to hearing from you all. And if you happen to be on iTunes, make sure to subscribe to the show and also to give us a rating or review. That would be really awesome. So thanks in advance for that. Well, that's it for this episode. Thanks again for joining me. Go out there and take a fresh look at where you are in your cafe with design and the brand. Get the components working together. Make a good impression on your customers. You know, your hard work and all the hard work that has gone before you to create this wonderful product of coffee that we all love, it deserves to be presented in a well-designed way. So I know you all are going to do great things in design. And as always, I hope that this episode, as well as all of the past episodes on the show, has given you keys to the shop.